Today, we have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Janet Cobb, fundraising coach here at Bonterra, who holds just a absolute wealth of knowledge, and we are in for a treat. If you've been on one of Janet's sessions before, you know that she's great. You know that she's coming at you with a lot of useful information. So grab your waters, your drinks, your snacks, and buckle in for a really great 45 to an hour. And we're welcomed and we're honored to be here with Janet. So with that, Janet, I will go ahead and pass it to you.
Thank you. Yes, here I am. And you're controlling the slides, right? Okay. So thank you everyone for being here. Just to reiterate, I don't watch the chat while I'm talking, or I, I can't divide my attention very well that way. So if you do have questions along the way, be sure to put them in the Q&A and we'll try and get to them at the end. And if we can't get to them, I will often try and write something up to share with you when we send out the slides. So don't be shy with your questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question, except one you already know the answer to. So if you have the question, someone else probably does too. So please, be active in that channel as well as in the chat. All right, so I am also here from Chicago, a warm 30 some degrees today. We have hit the heat wave of February. So thank you all for braving the cold and sitting down with your coffee to spend some time with us. We are today talking about practical strategies to future-proof your organization and build long-term stability. So, that says a lot. And, what we're going to dig into is how we're going to diversify your revenue to reduce risk and avoid over-reliance on any one single funding source, how to prioritize technology investments, ways to strengthen leadership and governance, and then how to build stronger donor relationships. That's a lot to cover in a lunchtime. So let's just dig right in. I think it's really important to remember right now that the new tax bill that passed last year, a lot of changes are going into effect this year. So one thing that you want to be aware of is the above the line deduction for non-itemizers. So these are just the average folks who probably give you, contributions, $100, a couple $100. They may not itemize on their taxes because the standard reduction is so high now, but now you can deduct up to $1,000. So if someone was giving you 500 and not itemizing, if they gave you 1,000, they can now take that as that will impact their deductions. So it's worth having that conversation with some of those folks and seeing if you can't increase some of those smaller end gifts that have dropped since the 2017 tax bill that increased the standard deduction. So that's one thing to think about. On the other end, the higher end donors, there must be a 0.5% adjusted gross income floor for something to be tax deductible. So someone who is giving at the higher level, they may be paying attention to what percentage of their adjusted gross income they were giving, because now they must hit that 0.5% for it to be tax deductible. Anything below that is not considered tax deductible. There's also at the very, very high end a cap on deductions at 35%. So that's a pretty high cap, if you ask me. But it's people at that very higher end giving level. There's also an elementary and secondary scholarship credit that people might want to check into, especially if you are in that arena of private education or anything like that that's going to be influenced by that. There's also a temporary increase in the state and local tax deduction cap that you'll want to explore, and there's an endowment excise tax. There are endowment excise tax changes, which are at the really high endowment level. So if you're functioning in those endowment worlds at the higher end, be sure you look into that. So that's just a general, you got to be aware of these as you're talking to folks so that you're not caught off guard if they ask you a question or, say these things are impacting them. The other thing we want to be aware of is that all of these changes are going to make giving for a lot of folks much more strategic at those higher end gifts. So you don't want to wait to have conversations with folks about their timing. Some people are going to bundle their gifts, so they give more in one year and then they give less or nothing in another year so that they can have the tax benefits of those bundled gifts. That's leading to far more use of donor advised funds. So you'll definitely want to hop on webinars around donor advised funds if you're not familiar with what those are, so that you can have, coherent conversations with people who are using donor advised funds and learning more about what might be happening at your community foundations and the local places that are housing donor advised funds. You want to make sure that you are addressing the donor concern for impact and confidence. Donors are being much more strategic in how they give because donors don't give to your organization, they give through your organization to make a difference, to solve a problem. If they believe, if they are confident that you are able to help them solve the problem they care about, they are much more likely to give to you, which means you have to show that to them. And showing them that you are able to solve the problem is about focusing on telling the stories of transformation and the impact, not outputs, not we served 75 families, but what difference your service made in the bigger cause area that you are addressing. So you want to make sure that you are helping donors feel confident in the work that you are doing. And you want to get far more personal. We've been banging this drum for a very long time that personalized messaging and conversational appeals go much further than sort of generic artificial form letters. Of course, you can't send an individual letter to 5,000 people or 1,000 people or even 500, but it's got to feel like it. So that's a really important thing to be thinking about. You can't just say, help us fulfill our mission. You've got to be specific. You've got to talk about what it means to the donor and what it means to the people being served or the communities being served. So those are really important trends to know. What does it mean? We're digging in now. What does it mean to diversify your revenue? Basically, there are some key categories of how revenue comes in through fundraising. What is not covered on this slide, and I need to point out, is you can have fees for service, you can have contract services with other entities. Those are all part of your revenue stream, but they're not impacted by fundraising. So what we're talking about here: corporate gifts, grants, events, major gifts, monthly giving, and general appeals through email, direct mail, or social media, crowdfunding platforms, those sorts of things. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about diversifying revenue. So if you look at this chart and you're saying, oh, well, 95% of our income comes from grants, that's not a real safe place to be. What you want to do is even out your pie so that you're getting a good outlay of where your gifts are coming in. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, we've got to focus on corporate gifts. But in that, while you do need to think about corporate gifts, you do not want to use time and resources that you may not have to focus on corporate gifts before you've done some of these other things, because corporate giving is about 5% of all giving in the United States. So corporations aren't sitting there waiting for you to come and ask them so they can give away their money. And that being said, under the new tax law, I didn't mention it on the previous screen, but corporations have to hit the 1% of their taxable income before a charitable gift is considered tax deductible. So that's an important part of the conversation. If you're asking for $500 sponsorships or $1,000 sponsorships,
Oh no, it looks like we might have lost.
you want to know who you're talking to?
Oh, Janet,
Yes.
it looked like we lost you for just a moment.
Oh, uh-oh, sorry.
No, it's
Uh,
all okay. We got you now. If you
okay.
want to repeat the last sentence, I think that's where it
Okay.
cut off.
So I was saying, if you're talking about to small businesses, that 1% might be hit at a much lower level than if you're talking to major corporations. But you do want to rethink your sponsorship packages for events and things like that when it comes to the new tax bill. But remember, corporate giving is about 5% of all giving. Grants are about 17% of all giving. So again, you don't want to, if you have a good grant system, yay, keep going. If you're new at grant writing, if you're a younger organization, it's going to take time for grants to start coming your way. So balance out your resources, because the bulk of giving happens from individuals, and individual giving makes up the rest, right? If corporations make up 5% and grants make up 17%, all the rest make up our individuals. Now, 10% of that is from bequests, which means when individuals die. So planned giving is a piece. I didn't list it here, sorry. But planned giving is a piece of major gifts, really, in a sense. When it comes to events, events have the lowest return on investment of time and resources. They are very, very labor intensive. They serve a purpose. Find one of my many webinars on events. They serve a purpose, but you have to make sure that you are planning well and doing the follow-up that makes an event worth it. Can be a part of your income. Let's not make it all of our income. Instead, we want to be thinking about the bottom three categories here: the major gifts, the monthly giving, and the general appeals. Major gifts are those that every organization has a different level that is considered a major gift, but these are the gifts that come from maybe the top 20% of your donor base, and they give you about 80% of your income, right? Of your individual giving income. So you want to start thinking about how you're strategizing around your major gift cultivation and conversation, and where you're putting your capacity, your resources there. Monthly giving is critical. It's on the rise. It's really important. It's an easy lift once you get it going. Be sure to check out. I have done so many webinars. There are lots of webinars out there about monthly giving. I'm sure we'll have another one at some point this year as well, right? So be sure, if you do not have a monthly giving program, not that, yeah, some people give us monthly gifts, but we have a concentrated, strategic, purposeful, intentional approach to growing our monthly giving. That's definitely something you want to do this year. It is a very sustainable funding mechanism. So be sure that you decide, don't even try, decide to invest in a monthly giving program this year, and that's going to work wonders. And then general appeals, um, those are the Giving Tuesdays, the year end, the ones that come around in the month of your cause area, Earth Day for environmental organizations, those sorts of things where you're kind of reaching out to the general public, social media, email, or direct mail, and you want to make sure that you are doing that well. We don't have time to go into all the details of what that means, but some of what we're going to cover moving forward will go into, what it means to approach donors in a way through those general appeals that is going to be more sustainable and future proof. Okay, so to do all of these things, technology is really critical. You want to be thinking about all the technology, your tech stack, that some people might refer to it. What do you have in your toolkit that is helping you to make fundraising more effective and efficient? You want to make sure you have online giving pages that are not just PayPal. A lot of people are swearing off PayPal for political reasons, so you want to be aware of that, right? If PayPal's your only online giving page source. You want to make sure that you're not losing people through the online giving process. I always say, how many clicks does it take for me to give you my money, right? If it takes too many clicks from the moment I land on your website to the point I can put in my credit card information or link to my Apple Pay or whatever it is, the less likely it is that I'm going to give, because giving online at a lower level is an impulse buy. It's an impulse act. It's not thought through carefully. And so if it takes too much, I'm going to check out. You want to make sure you have automated receipts so that if I put in my credit card or connect my Apple Pay or whatever, I immediately know that it was all processed. I shouldn't need to wait 2 or 3 days or a week or a month to know. You want to make sure that you have a way to manage your donor relationships, which means that you have something beyond an Excel spreadsheet that is helping you hold all of these donations and the information, contact information, and notes about the people who are giving you money. You want to be able to segment so that you're not speaking to everyone the same way all the time. Because if you're speaking to everyone the same way all the time, you're not really communicating with anyone. No one's really feeling heard, feeling seen, feeling engaged, right? You want to be able to pull up reports for your board so that everybody knows what's happening. You want to be able to do more sophisticated email communications, meaning you're not using Gmail to BCC everybody in your address book kind of thing, and then accidentally, oops, I forgot BCC and I just shared everybody's email with everybody, right? You don't want those things to happen. You want to be able to mail merge information like people's names so you're not getting dear friend. All of those things really make a difference in the effectiveness of your fundraising. If you can do video, they used to say a picture's worth 1,000 words. I say if a picture's worth 1,000 words, video's worth 10,000, right? Like, video is the mechanism in today's world that people like to consume information. And it doesn't have to be super polished. It doesn't have to be, professional. It has to be authentic. It has to be accessible. It has to be true and real. And that's what people relate to. Text messaging, you get mixed bags depending on generations, depending on geographic locations, depending on cause area. Different people respond and relate to text messaging in different ways. But if you have a text messaging feature that you are able to use, it is going to go much further as you get to know your donor base more and who wants to relate in which way. If you think about email, how many people have thousands? I saw someone's email inbox the other day that had over 84,000 unread emails? How many unread text messages do you have? Not many. People don't leave unread text messages, but they leave unread emails. And the younger generation, if that's part of your target audience, if I email something to my kids who are all in their 20s, I have to text them to tell them to check their email because otherwise they're not seeing it, right? So you got to be aware of those things. If you rely heavily on volunteers, make sure that you have some type of volunteer management in your tech stack. And then if there's any kind of AI, and there's all sorts of opinions about AI. I know there is environmental implications, there are privacy implications, there are, intellectual property implications. There's a lot of implications, but it's here. So, how are you using it to be more effective in your fundraising without accidentally um, breaking privacy laws around donor privacy? There are really important donor privacy and donor data laws. So you want to make sure if you're using AI to analyze what you are doing, that what your donor information is, that you're not putting it into a general ChatGPT, Claude, Genesis kind of environment where that data can be exposed. So you want to see if your technology incorporates and integrates AI analysis in a way that's going to be helpful for you. Okay. That was a lot. That was a lot. Let's breathe for a minute. Think for a minute if you have any questions around that whole technology breakdown, and make sure you get your questions in the chat because, in the Q&A box, because, we can answer those now. Now, the thing about technology, I went through what your tech stack needs to look like or what you want to consider, but really what we're breaking down is the difference between something being more efficient, more effective, how it helps with donor stewardship, and how it helps with institutional history, which is going to connect to our governance and leadership in a slide to come, right? So technology helps you be more efficient because there's more automation, there's reduced repetition, there's better tracking. That's going to make you more efficient. I once walked into an organization that had a technology tool that they weren't using well. And when I made sure all the updates were in place and that the person using it was trained properly, what used to take 4 or 5 hours a week started taking 30 minutes, which meant all of that time was freed up to do lots of other things, right? So efficiency is important when we are strapped for time, which I don't know a nonprofit that isn't, right? Because we're here trying to do good in the world, trying to save the world in whatever way we are, trying to improve and better the world. And there's a lot to do, a lot to be done. So the more efficient we can be, the better. It is effective because it can give you better donor insights. It can give you a variety of communication channels. It gives you accuracy. You find holes in your data. You find, duplicates in your data. You realize that someone who you thought was lapsed actually just had information put in a different name. And so really you've been thinking they haven't been supporting you and you realize they have, right? So it makes it more effective. And then donor stewardship, which is really what it's all about, the whole purpose. Technology is not a magic bullet, but it is a very helpful tool if you use it well to segment your donors, to track all of the information for better identification, because a donor who is stewarded well is going to stick around. And donor retention is far better than new donor acquisition. If I had a dollar for every time a nonprofit told me they needed to acquire new donors, instead of focusing on donor retention, I'd be a millionaire, right? When really donor retention is where it is, because someone who's given you money before is more likely to give again if you steward them well than someone who's never given to you. It's easier to make a deeper friend than it is to find a new one, right? And then institutional history. The turnover rate of an average director of development in the nonprofit world is 18 months. So if I don't have a place as a as a development person, if I don't have a place to keep all of the notes and to track what is being done as far as outreach and donor stewardship and appeals and all of that, when I leave, the next person starts from scratch. And that's just not effective or efficient or good donor stewardship. If there are transitions at the very top as the founder leaves and you get a new ED, all of those things are really, really critical. You want the donor to be connected to the organization, not to one specific individual. So technology helps to be the receptacle of all the institutional history so that you don't have to keep starting over and you don't lose really important information about a donor. Okay, so then we're thinking about strengthening leadership and governance. You've probably all heard you need 100% board engagement. 100% board giving is a very common expression. Grant applications often ask what percentage of your board is giving. And if 100% of your board is giving, that adds points to the likelihood that you'll get that grant, because board members have the fiduciary responsibility to ensure the long-term viability of the organization. And if it's their job to make sure the organization is financially viable, and they're not helping to support it, how can you expect anybody else to help support it? Now, how much someone gives, in my worldview, it doesn't matter how much they give. 10 cents is a monetary donation that makes me a donor at the level that I can, right? Then, when I ask someone else to give at the level that is meaningful to them, I'm not asking them to do anything I haven't done. Okay, so that's really, to me, important. Now, in full disclosure, there are whole schools of thought and other nonprofit experts who will disagree with me. I've had conversations disagreeing with them. Time is money, so if they're giving their time, they don't need to give their money, right? That's why my approach is it doesn't matter how much money, but there's something about money in the United States of America that makes it different. And we have a lot of information that a lot of board members feel hesitant to ask for money because they feel like they're begging. And we feel like we're begging when we're asking someone to do something that we aren't willing to do. And so as soon as we've done what we can monetarily, then that removes that and it becomes a peer-to-peer conversation. You're asking someone to join you. And as soon as you're asking someone to join you, that removes that stigma of begging. Again, that's my personal approach. If you want to hear the other side, I do recommend going and looking up Voulet, who is a very strong proponent of not asking board members to give money. So Voulet, Vule. Okay. So I don't know if Voulet realizes how much I talk about him, but I always want to give everybody the other side. Okay. There's lots of ideas in the nonprofit arena. Okay. So board engagement, though, is beyond giving, because every board member should be involved in fundraising. But fundraising fundamentally, 99.9% of fundraising has nothing to do with asking for money. Surprise, surprise. Yes, I said that. I will repeat it. Fundraising has very, very little to do with asking for money. Yes, sometimes it is very important that we outright ask. There is so much more to it. It is about building relationships. And so board members have different roles they can play in those relationships. They can be ambassadors. That means they're just out there talking about how great the organization is. Do all of their friends and relatives, do their pickleball club members, do their book club members, do their church friends, do their, college sorority girls, like who in their world knows about your organization because they are your board member? That's really, really, really critical. Then, of all those people they know that they have shared all of your great work, how many of those folks have any kind of inkling that they might want to learn more? And if they do want to learn more, then the board member becomes a connector. Okay. They introduce the organization more fully, or they bring that person to some kind of a meeting or an event, or put them on the newsletter list, right? Not everyone in my world is going to join the newsletter list of whatever organization I'm on the board of, but some of them will, right? Then, whether or not a board member knows a person, they can help steward a relationship. So if you do a general appeal, you can, and people give to you, those board members can make thank you phone calls, can write thank you notes, can, prepare thank you appreciation tokens to be sent to everybody. Whatever it is that you're doing to steward and appreciate your donors at different levels, there are board members who can be involved in that. Even if they don't have a big, huge network and they can't be great ambassadors and they can't be great connectors, they can steward. All right. And then finally, there is the solicitor, the person who actually asks for money. Now, on your whole board, not everybody's going to do all of those things. But if you have an honest conversation with your board and people say, oh, I'm happy to be an ambassador and sometimes I can connect, right? If you have no solicitors, then you need to fix your board, right? If you have no solicitors, like no one on your board is going to help, then what are you going to do about it, right? Okay, so that's what I mean by 100% board engagement and fundraising. It's that there are different roles to play. Different people at different times play different roles. Now, if you're going to launch a capital campaign, you need board solicitors. Okay, so please don't jump into a capital campaign if you haven't fixed this yet. All right. Then the other piece is from the very beginning of your organization, you need to be thinking about succession planning. How are you capturing all of the institutional history of your organization, the relationships that you've built? How is all of that being created so that it outlives any one person? Now, if I'm the founder of an organization and my mother gives generously every year to the organization, there is a likelihood that if I step away, my mom might step away too, right? You will lose some donors in any transition process, but you want to make sure that your leadership team is creating a scenario where people believe not only in your organization, but in the cause. And if they believe in the cause and you're stewarding them well, they're going to stick around to support the organization, right? So that's why more people than one person needs to be involved in fundraising. That's why you have technology that helps you track people's relationships and how they communicate and what their history is and what brought them to the organization and why they stay involved. You have to be tracking all of those things as part of your succession plan. And then I have to say this because I work with a lot of organizations that are in the midst of succession, like the founder's trying to leave. They're trying to leave. They're ready to let go. But there are some things that people aren't thinking about anymore. And one of those is, where are all the passwords and where does the two-step authentic verification happen? If every two-step verification that is connected to any of the various platforms you're on is connected to the executive director's personal phone, we've got a problem, right? You've got to figure all that out. The sooner all of that happens, the earlier in the history of the organization that all of that happens, and you have policies in place for how passwords are managed and how two-step verification is handled and where the duplication is. You have a safe somewhere, you have a vault online, whatever it is, so that if someone leaves unexpectedly, you're not in a lurch. And none of us like to think about this, but in the last 5 years, I've been doing this coaching for 10 years now. I've worked with over 900 organizations in that time period. But in the last 5 years, I've had 5 executive directors suddenly die. And the organizations floundered because they just weren't ready. So we don't like to think about it, but it is a reality. And I mean, COVID woke up a lot of people to that, but none of the 5 I mentioned were COVID related deaths, right? I went post COVID. Post COVID, 5 people have passed, right? So you want to make sure that you've got all of that in order. All right. Now, building stronger donor relationships. As I mentioned early on, a really important trend right now, donors want to trust you. They want to know that you are making an impact. They want to be confident that their money is being used wisely. So, how are you making sure that all of that happens? One thing I do not have on this slide, but I want to make sure I talk about is, and Ashley, maybe you can write these in the chat for me so people can copy paste them. Make sure that your charity watchdog websites, GuideStar, Charity Navigator, greatnonprofits.org, those 3 especially are up to date. Go in, make sure your profiles have been captured or have been, I forget the word, you what is, I'm missing the word. Log in, make sure you own your profile, right? That you can update your profile, that it's all current, and that you're following what they recommend as ways to show you are credible and verifiable and trustworthy. GuideStar, Charity Navigator, greatnonprofits.org. GuideStar is also now called Candid. But GuideStar, Charity Navigator, greatnonprofits.org. Okay, so make sure you do that. But then, and that's helpful for people who want to look you up, right? But then within your own database, for people who already know you, people who are already connecting, what is most fundamental and has one of the biggest impacts on donor retention and donor giving is your culture of gratitude. How quickly are you thanking people? How often are you thanking people? And how are you thanking people? What are you doing to thank people? There are studies that show that if people are thanked within 48 hours of making a gift, they are 4 times more likely to give again. This is not the receipt. An automated receipt should happen automatically. And then within 48 hours, someone should receive something showing that a human being recognized that they made a gift to this organization, right? These can be formulaic to a certain extent, right? You want to merge their names, you want to make sure they feel personable, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. It can be a system for you, right? But it still needs to happen quickly. Now, within 48 hours, it is via email. If someone sends in a check, you want to get that letter out. If you're sending them a letter or a card, you want to get something out through the mail within 48 hours. It may take a couple days for it to get to them. That's ideal if you have the capacity at all to do that. When people say, I'm tight on capacity, I don't have resources, what's the number one thing I should do? Always focus on thanking. If you thank the people who give to you now, they'll give to you again. If you don't, they're less likely to give to you. I talk about a culture of gratitude because there is a nice little rhyme called the attitude of gratitude. But I said I stopped using the attitude of gratitude when I had a teenage daughter and realized attitudes change with the wind. But a culture of gratitude is steady, it's omnipresent, it's by osmosis, and it's spread across the entire organization. What approach do you all have as an organization, whether you're program staff, whether you're volunteers, whether you're the janitor, whether you're the board member? How do you approach gratitude for your donors, for the work you're able to do, for life in general? That makes an enormous difference in the culture of the organization and how people will gravitate towards you. And it's not just fake and phony, it is reality because people want to be hopeful. They want to know they're making a difference. And when you are grateful and you express that gratitude, it it starts to become contagious, right? People want to participate in that. The second part of building a stronger donor relationship is about listening. Too many of us spend time talking before we listen. And the best thing you can do when you get a first time donation, regardless of the dollar amount, if you have a phone number for the donor, call them and thank them. Now, if you send out an email within 48 hours, the phone call can come within the first 6 weeks or the first couple months. But at some point, those first time donors should get a phone call and you thank them for their gift and you ask them what inspired it. How did they come to know your organization? What inspired their gift? What led them to, support this cause? And then listen. And the stories you hear will improve your relationship with that donor and your donor processes in general, because you will begin to understand what draws people to your cause and what motivates them to give. And then you begin fundraising with that in mind. You want to make sure, I mentioned this already, to report impact, not just outputs. What difference is your work making in the lives of those being served? And then a really, really important part about donor relationships is that you begin to segment. At the very least, donors and non-donors in your communication database, whatever you're using, donors and non-donors should not be getting the same communications, because donors should be feeling like they're part of all of this good work happening. They should feel appreciated. They should feel like they're making a difference. If you talk that way to a non-donor, they're going to get all those feel goods without ever acting. And so that's going to lessen their impact and their likelihood to give. What you want to create in a non-donor communication is FOMO, fear of missing out. Like, you can be a part of this, right? Good things are happening. You can be a part of this. Problems are here. You can help solve them, right? Very different donor and non-donor communications are important. Not every single, well, I say every communication, but you can do some general things without that separation, but a good percentage of your um, communications should be segmented at the very least between those two groups. All right. I think that I have covered the content that fundamentally, hopefully, will future proof your organization. But let's dig into some questions. We have a little bit of time, right, Ashley?
Yes, we do. We will dig into some great questions that we have in the Q&A and chat. But before we transition to Q&A, folks, I did want to just let you know if you are interested in specifically, you know how Janet talked about technology and the importance of using technology. If you are looking for tools to help future-proof your nonprofit, to help collect donor information and keep it all in one place, I'm going ahead and launching another poll here. It should be on your screen here. Feel free to again fill that out. And then once we wrap up today's conversation, we will have one of our colleagues reach out to you to initiate those conversations and see if some of our tools and services might be a good fit for your organization. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that up for just a couple moments here, and we can go ahead and get started with Q&A. The first question comes from Elaine. I think this was earlier, Janet, when you were discussing how corporations give and some of the new changes that are taking place with that. Elaine was wondering if a good idea, or are you saying to ask corporations for a higher amount because of some of these changes and the ways that they might do funding?
Right. That's why I mentioned the difference, and I think I got cut off at that point. You
Yeah.
have to know who you're asking. Small businesses and larger corporations might need to be handled differently. You wouldn't ask them all for the same amount. And I highly recommend, if you have a relationship because people have given to you before, corporations have sponsored events before or anything like that, have a conversation with them. Don't just outright ask for more. Say, hey, I've learned the new tax law is impacting this. How is it impacting you? How can we make it mutually beneficial? Right? Because they may want to give every other year. So let's talk about that ahead of time. And then how is that going to impact what we do with their sponsorship from year to year, et cetera? So it's not an automatic just ask everybody for more. Be aware of the difference. Decide, what bucket are they? Small business? Are they large corporation? Do we know them? If so, let's have a conversation. If we don't, should we create two different sort of levels of giving depending on, a small business owner might want that $1,000 personal itemization thing from a personal perspective instead of giving through their business because it's not tax deductible, that kind of thing.
Right. Wonderful. We have another question here from Carolyn. Carolyn asks, and I think this is in response to making a monetary gift required by your board, but she asked, should you include a monetary requirement with a specific dollar amount in the bylaws?
Oh, no, bylaws should not be that specific. Some bylaws do. I don't think you should. I don't even think you should say that there is a minimum requirement. I think it needs to be a cultural thing, an expectation. Um, I wouldn't. I wouldn't make it a policy. Um, but I wouldn't hide it when you're talking to someone about joining the board. There is an expectation that every board member gives at a level that is meaningful and doable for them, right? And that's different for every person. So once it's in writing, then it gets very corporate and um it pushes people out. It pushes people off. It turns people off, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another question from Elaine. Elaine asked, you say it's best practice to thank them within 48 hours. Do you think that a quick phone call would suffice, I guess, as opposed to like a formal email?
Absolutely. Phone calls, videos, those are great. You need to make sure they get the official thank you. If it's automated, that's done. You don't have to worry about it. If it's not automated, at some point that needs to go out. But a quick thank you phone call, fabulous. And donors love thank you videos. Love them.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a question here from Nancy if we had any recommendations for vendors that can do online giving pages. I will say we're of course going to be very biased here at Bonterra. That is something that we offer, Nancy, and if that's something that you are looking for, we're happy to have a conversation and connect offline once this wraps up, and get you set up with one. But of course, yeah, we will be biased and mention our own tools and services here. We have another couple of questions here about we are sending the recording. I did want to make sure that folks were made aware that yes, we did record today's session, and we will be sending that out to the email you used to register. And Sydney asked a question about if we have any other recommendations for webinars for dysfunctional boards. I don't know if we have any that are explicitly said dysfunctional boards, but Janet, I know you've done several webinars on board engagement and getting your board engaged. If you all want to check out our YouTube page, which I can go ahead and link here in the chat, we have several on your nonprofit board and getting them involved that I will go ahead and link our channel here. And feel free to scroll through and grab whatever sounds best to you and what suits you here.
I might
Wonderful.
also just,
Mhm.
I mean, for clarity's sake, board source is a great board resource, right? So if you really want like white papers and, policy documents and all sorts of things like that, board source is great. Board effect is great. I mean, we do webinars and they're great. I think they're great. Like, but when you're really talking about governance and all of that, um, National Council for Nonprofits has a lot of stuff. Board source and board, I think it's board effect, are also great. Thank
Perfect.
you,
I went ahead and put
Ashley.
those in the chat.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
absolutely. Wonderful. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions coming through. I will give folks just a couple of seconds here in these last moments to drop any last minute questions here. But while folks do that, Janet, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. For those on the line, I hope she delivered what I promised, which is always a great and insightful session. It's always great to have Janet on the line, and you can always know that you're going to learn a lot from her.
Robin Zimmerman did ask a question
Oh, I
in
see
the
here.
in the chat. I just opened it. Do you have a succession file? Actually, um, I have just started to create one
Wonderful.
because a lot of people are asking. So, I mean, a good place to find me, besides on Bonterra websites, is that you can find me on LinkedIn at Janet Cobb. I show up in that pink hoodie that's at the beginning of this webinar. Um, and then I have a Substack called Small Nonprofit Whisperer, and I think I'm going to share it there. So if you follow me on Substack too, that could be helpful for that. And maybe we should do a webinar just on that, Ashley.
Sounds good. We can get planning. We can get planning. Stay tuned, folks. You might see an invite for that in the next couple of weeks here.
Thank
Wonderful. And then I just put Janet's LinkedIn here into the chat, so feel
you,
free to follow
Ashley.
her on LinkedIn as well. But wonderful. Yes. Thank you again, Janet, for just such a
Thanks,
wonderful
everybody.
presentation. I feel future proofed and I don't even have a nonprofit. So, and folks on the line, thank you. Thank you for spending an hour with us. Thank you for your time and attention and great, insightful questions. It always makes for a great session when folks are engaged in the chat. So we really appreciate your time. And we hope to see you at our next session. Awesome. Bye, everyone.